As you can imagine, extreme heat can be especially dangerous for pregnant people and the elderly, a situation that can become even more precarious if the heat forces widespread power outages. Right now, the continued heat is already taking a tremendous toll on the country's power grids. More than 200,000 people were left without power in Ohio this week amid a heat wave there. American Electric Power, the power company there, says the move was intentional and necessary to, quote, prevent widespread damage. And in Texas, the June heat has already caused electricity use there to reach an all-time high, which seems to beg the question, can America's energy infrastructure take the heat, so to speak? Here now is Romany Webb. She's a senior fellow and associate research scholar at Columbia Law School's Sabin Center for Climate Change. Romany Webb, thank you so much for taking the time. Is our grid, our electric grid as we see it right now, is it built to withstand these kinds of extremes?
No, absolutely not. As you said, these high temperatures drive really high demand for electricity. At the same time, they also make electricity much more difficult to produce and deliver. A lot of power plants don't do well in the heat. Natural gas power plants, for example, really struggle. They operate less efficiently and they produce less output. And so we have this combination of really high demand and restricted supply. If we don't plan for that eventuality, then we do see these outages like are being experienced in many parts of the country.
So it's interesting because we've been going through some different things in the country over the last couple of years as natural gas prices went lower and lower. Some of the coal plants said, we're going to get out of the coal business because the cost efficiency of gas seems so much better. Is some of that sort of monopoly or chessboarding of these plants, has that had some effect on this as well?
Well, we often hear, I think, in times of outages caused by these extreme weather events that renewables must be to blame because renewable generation is inherently less reliable. But that's really not the case. As I said, a lot of these fossil fuel plants, the natural gas plants and the coal plants that still continue to operate, they really struggle with high temperatures. They also struggle with drought, which, as we just heard, is becoming more common and more severe due to climate change. So certainly the generation mix does affect reliability, but really what's more important is making sure we have enough generation to meet these spikes in demand and making sure that we can get it to consumers, which is really important. That transmission system and that distribution system that delivers the electricity, that also really struggles in high heat. It struggles with things like hurricanes and storms, flooding. So again, another area where we need to be planning for these climate impacts to make sure our infrastructure can withstand them and can keep the lights on.
It was somebody, I was reading one of the companies saying, well, we knew this, we had some idea that this was coming, but it's come faster than we anticipated. If you could wave a magic wand and fix 3 or 4 things or 1 or 2 things in a more sort of almost immediate way, what would they be?
Well, the number one thing I would change is to ensure that these climate impacts are factored into our electric system planning. We have long known that climate change is driving these more extreme weather events, the heat waves, the floods, the droughts. We have also long known that all of those things affect the operation of the electricity system. Unfortunately, a lot of electric utilities and system operators haven't planned for that reality and have chosen instead to stick their heads in the sand. So what really we should be doing is we should be thinking about when we're investing in new facilities or upgrading existing facilities, we should be thinking about the types of conditions they will experience over their full useful life, 20, 30, 40 years in the future. And we should be designing, constructing, and operating them in a way that can withstand those impacts and so they're not vulnerable to those impacts. That is, I think, the number one most important thing we can do. There's plenty of other things we can do as well. We should be accelerating the transition to renewable energy sources to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions so that we don't make climate change too much worse than it already is. That's really important. We should also be thinking about ways we can make the system more resilient to these climate impacts. So investing in more battery storage, investing in more distributed generation, so the generation is within cities, within communities, really important.
It's interesting because as we go back even a couple of winters to the disaster that happened in Texas, which is its own grid system, does it feel to some extent like people who are in charge of these things, Texas perhaps, or even the ones that are going to be are predicted to be in trouble this summer? Texas is one of them. California is another one. Have they been kind of asleep at the switch? I mean, someone should be held to account, it seems like, for some of what's going on here.
Certainly, there were opportunities, and there continue to be opportunities for electric utilities and system operators to be planning more effectively for these impacts. There is a need for more oversight from regulators. We are starting to see some of the regulators weigh in on these topics and require utilities to do this sort of planning and to think about these climate impacts. But certainly, we have a long way to go.
Romany, Webb, we appreciate your expertise. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. Do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.